It's a short trip across a bridge to get to a 413-acre parcel of landfill, Rikers Island, New York City's most notorious lockup, situated like a 19th-century penal colony in the middle of the East River. Ranked as one of the 10 worst correctional facilities in the U.S., inmates there await being shipped to a federal prison for long stretches, or are short-timers doing what's called city time. One former Rikers resident, the disgraced septuagenarian film producer and convicted rapist Harvey Weinstein, who had been awaiting trial on sex crimes charges, claimed the Big Apple's pen was rotten to the core. He sued the city in November for $5 million, charging deplorable conditions, there where he feared for his life. Now David Campbell and Jarrod Shanahan, both of whom spent time in Rikers, have collaborated to write City Time on being sentenced to Rikers Island, New York University Press. An expose about life at the nearly century-old Rikers, the island that once served as a military training ground during the Civil War, and today has a view of LaGuardia's runways and the Mets' home ground, Citi Field. Arrested at a Black Lives Matter protest in 2016, Shanahan served a brief Rikers sentence and wrote a historical study of the prison after his release, while Campbell, convicted in 2018 of brawling at an anti-fascist protest, served a year of city time. Their book reveals first-hand accounts of the brutality and banality of everyday Rikers life. The violence and utter meaninglessness of short-stay incarceration is reflected in every facet of city time. The crushing boredom that suffuses daily life is symptomatic of a social order that simply has no use for the people locked up there. In a dangerous, disgusting place that will leave them worse off than when they entered, write the authors. Both college-educated and heterosexual, they luckily avoided the violence that accompanies Rikers' trans and gay sexual subculture. But becoming inmates assigned a prison number and jailhouse garb was bad enough, making them feel loss and mortification. On day one, recall the authors, Rikers' intake area consisted of filthy pens where new prisoners were herded in next to putrid and non-flushable toilets, along with the sickly polluted air. Odors of sweat, feet, piss, shit, burps, farts, and bleach. Stripping to their underwear, Shanahan and Campbell, like all other Rikers guests, had to hover over a chair that could detect metal contraband stored internally. That's even before the actual physical strip search began. Inmates must then change into ill-fitting forest green jumpsuits and flat-bottomed Velcro footwear before being escorted into the intake dormitory furnished with stationary single beds with deflated, flimsy mattresses. There are 28 rectangular dormitories in all containing a total of 1,850 beds. Massive open rooms. Write the authors. Each dormitory is the size of a basketball court, with both crawling cockroaches as well as correctional officers patrolling the perimeter. A 6-foot-wide corridor dubbed Broadway bisects the dorm with 6 rows of rusted iron bed frames 3 feet apart and bolted to the floor on either side of the main thoroughfare. Limited hygiene standards prohibited naked showering, and inmates are required to cover themselves when using the toilet. Foul odors and grotesque sights only add to the loss of privacy. Racial and ethnic tensions simmered unchecked, but gang members help correctional officers keep temperatures down. With so many inmates serving time for stealing, the dorm's population felt to the authors like a convention of boosters. They describe how one inmate had been caught lifting nail polish from CVS in large quantities and then selling it to a Chinatown nail salon. Another recounted filling his bag with Haagen-Dazs in a Midtown Manhattan market and selling it to bodegas in Harlem for $2 a carton. Dwayne Reed's surveillance footage nailed him stealing more than $1,000 worth, and he was charged with grand theft. To him, however, Rikers was like a stay at the Ritz. He normally lived at a dangerously crime-riddled New York homeless shelter. Along with professional shoplifters, the author's fellow inmates ranged from bank robbers, drunk drivers, wife-beaters, drug dealers, felony assaulters, and various types of petty criminals. Half of the 6,000 inmates usually served 30 days or less of city time, mostly for theft and drug possession. These tragic men were caught in an unending cycle of poverty, substance abuse, mental illness, and bad decisions, whose only agenda seemed to escape reality by getting high and supporting this habit by any means necessary, write the authors. And they only got out of bed for their daily dose of methadone. And there were the violent gang members, Crips, Bloods, Latin Kings, and the Folk Nation. There is little to do in Rikers in comparison to state prisons, and finding creative ways to stave off the ever-encroaching boredom and cabin fever quickly becomes a priority. Write the authors? How to make the time tolerable and go by quickly is the name of the card game, playing spades and rummy. Dice, banned at Rikers, are crafted from soap and toilet paper. The authors soon learned that the most popular books coming through the mail featured graphic drug dealing, violence, and sex. Pocket Bibles supplied rolling papers for weed instead of God's word. The Post proved popular for news on the outside, read by guards and then salvaged from the trash by inmates. As with the inmates, there are strict rules for Rikers visitors, write the authors. Rikers visitors are subjected to invasive searches by aggressive correction officers for smuggled contraband, and inmates are ordered to cease and desist from groping.